Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Enterprising Individuals, the Star Trek discussion podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the series, characters, and stories of the Star Trek universe. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, a.k.a. Caliban, and dating a Borg drone can't be easy. After all, men are from Mars, and women are from the Delta Quadrant. I'm joined in this episode once again by New York Times and USA Today bestselling author David R. George III. David is the author of many Star Trek novels, including tales set in the original series era, Deep Space Nine, and the Lost Era adventures of the Enterprise B. He also blogs about cinema and reviews films at moviereviewsbygeorge.com. Dave, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. Always glad to be back.
It's great to have you back on the show once more. And today we'll be talking about Someone to Watch Over Me, the 22nd episode of the 5th season of Star Trek Voyager. A musical standard is a song that has achieved a canonical status due to its popularity and the universal emotions that it evokes. Any artist that covers a standard seeks to put their own personal touch on it to express their individuality while still communicating those relatable feelings. Dramatic storytelling often follows that same tune of borrowing familiar plots, and even a sci-fi series set in the 24th century isn't above reusing a classic premise. But like any cover song, a dramatic homage is an opportunity to use personality and improvisation to make something old new again. But we'll talk about that a little later in the show. First, Dave, it is great to have you back on the show. What is new in your world?
What is new in my world? That's a good question. I wish there were maybe some more new things. I've got a few irons in the fire in terms of writing, but nothing concrete, nothing that I can talk about right now. But I'm working on it. Hopefully, next time you have me on, I can say, "Oh, well, I've got this book coming out," but not right now.
Sure, I've learned to recognize good news from authors in that it's I'm working on a bunch of stuff. I can't say anything, and it's like that means good. Things are going good.
Yeah, I can't complain.
Yeah.
Although that usually doesn't stop me.
Well, here's a chance for you to complain. I have to ask you, as a diehard Mets fan, what do you think about the rumor that Alex Rodriguez is interested in buying the Mets?
You know, yeah. So this is the excruciating part of the podcast. You know, Alex Rodriguez is an interesting guy. He grew up a Mets fan, so the rumor, and he has more money than the rest of the universe.
Yeah.
He has more money than Oprah, so
yeah.
It makes sense that could be a thing that could happen. And Rodriguez, when he became a free agent for the first time, when he was with the Mariners, he wanted to come to the Mets, and I so hoped, he was such a great player, that the Mets would sign him. And, of course, the Mets being the Mets, they messed it up in about the first 30 seconds of his free agency. But then, so I loved Rodriguez. He didn't come to the Mets. He went to the Rangers and then on to the Yankees. But when he started using steroids, that's when he lost me, because I'm a purist for the game. I just want, when guys cheating, let's not talk about the Astros. Of course, that also impacted the Mets.
Yeah.
So Rodriguez he's a lot of gray area with Rodriguez, right? He's a good guy. He's a bad guy. He was a great ball player, but then he also cheated. Having said that, I would pretty much want anybody in the world to buy the Mets right now, because their current ownership, which they've had for 20 years, is dreadful. Yeah. And it's terrible to root for a team where you can change the players, you can change the manager, but you're not going to end up changing ownership. And if the ownership is bad, you're not going anywhere. And this ownership treats the Mets, who play in New York City, the capital of the world, like a small market team.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
I'd have to imagine that a lot of Mets feel the same way that or Mets fans feel the same way that you do about A-Rod, and the sort of good parts of his character and the parts that are hard to get around.
Yeah, I mean it's tough, but I know there are plenty of Mets fans out there who want the Mets sold, because they've started sending the Mets general manager Brodie Van Wagenen, they started sending him money on Venmo.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. $1
Wow.
here, a penny there, $10 here. They just want something to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Just everybody's trying to help out. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
You're reviewing movies at moviereviewsbygeorge.com. I always love your movie reviews. What were your thoughts about the Oscar winners for this year?
There are a couple that we still haven't seen that we're dying to see, and we're trying to Netflix them, and just, of course, everybody and their mother is trying to get these discs, so we haven't been able to get, like Parasite, which I started hearing like Hollywood buzz about Parasite ended last year, beginning in January.
Sure.
And then I had friends who started seeing it and have not heard one bad thing. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm dying to.
Yeah.
I thought overall, I liked the Academy Awards. I thought they were pretty good. There were, I like Laura Dern a great deal. I think she won Best Supporting Actress for her body of work. I think she did a fine job in Marriage Story, but she didn't have a lot to do in that. I mean, there was not a lot of emotional range, whereas, say, Scarlett Johansson in Jojo Rabbit, who was also nominated for Best Supporting Actress, was fantastic and just had some heavy lifting in that film. And in fact, having not seen Parasite yet, of all the films I did see last year, and I saw about 50 movies from 2019, Jojo Rabbit was my favorite.
Okay. Interesting. It did win for adapted screenplay.
Taika Waititi is very talented. He's a terrific writer and director.
Yeah.
And actor.
Oh, yeah, that too. Oscar often does that. They reward somebody for like their body of work, instead of a specific role. And I'm certainly not mad about the Laura Dern win. And I think that, ScarJo was double nominated this year. She'll definitely be back in future years.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think Brad Pitt also nominated for his body of work, frankly. I mean, I liked him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I thought there were other better performances. But he's been good for a very long time. So, I mean, that made sense, too.
Yeah, certainly. Well, why did you want to talk about the specific episode, Someone to Watch Over Me, today?
I remember, first of all, you and I've been on the podcast a few times before. We did Corbomite Maneuver from the original series.
Yes.
We did All Good Things from Next Generation, and we did Duet from Deep Space Nine. I thought, all right, well, maybe it's time to do Voyager.
Sure.
Right? Let's just go down the series. And so when I thought about Voyager, there were a number of episodes that stood out for me, and this is one of the first that popped into my head. And I thought, let's give this one a go, because it's kind of a quiet episode, and certainly it's flawed in some of its aspects. But I did remember Jeri Ryan being particularly good in it, and especially Robert Picardo. And it was just a very, like I say, quiet and really touching episode. So I thought, well, let's give that a look. And when I rewatched it before, you and I had this conversation, I was rewarded with the fact that I remembered that part of it correctly, that this was a really solid Jeri Ryan, Robert Picardo episode.
Yeah, certainly. Speaking of movies, I had you on Craft of Services, my movie podcast, a little while back to talk about the film Alien, directed by Ridley Scott. As a movie buff, I'm curious if you've seen the 1987 Ridley Scott film Someone to Watch Over Me.
I have not.
I have not either.
I'm not even familiar with it.
I was surprised that I hadn't heard of it before. It's Ridley Scott. It stars Tom Berenger, Mimi Rogers, and Lorraine Bracco. And the synopsis is, after a Manhattan socialite witnesses her friend's murder at the hands of a ruthless mobster, a rookie detective, Berenger, is assigned to protect her. While working on the case, the two fall in love, and he's forced to choose between his wife and the woman he's protecting, while the mobster will stop at nothing to silence her.
Sounds different from the Voyager episode.
A little different, yeah. But it's got I think I know why I haven't heard of it. It's got a 69% Rotten Tomatoes review, which was probably one of Scott's lesser films. And not genre related. A lot of his films, of course, like Robin Hood and Alien and stuff like that, is what we hear about. But I'm always fascinated to find movies and TV show episodes that are named after classic songs, like this one is, of course, named after Someone to Watch Over Me by George and Ira Gershwin, that was written in 1926 and made popular by Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, so on and so forth. Sting actually recorded a version of the song for the 87 film. And I've got a theory that I've brought up on Craft of Services. It's really more of an observation that I have, that films with titles that are inspired by songs are usually not very good. And I don't have super hard data. Tastes vary, but in my observation, this is true. Some film examples would be In Dreams, Only the Lonely, and depending on your own personal mileage, Pretty Woman. And that's just the Roy Orbison division.
Yeah, In Dreams, all of those. And Pretty Woman, I know people love that film, and it's okay, but
it's got a surprisingly low Rotten Tomatoes review, actually.
Well, I think the audience kind of liked it, and I think it's remembered very fondly. I'm not sure if that's because of Julia Roberts or. I think this movie is better sort of in the memory than it is in reality.
Yeah.
But I will. You may well be right about the song-titled movies. However, I will throw up a Stand By Me to refute you.
Oh, sure. Well, there's always exceptions that prove the rule, but that's
the
that's
exception
definitely a
that
pretty
proves
good
the
movie.
rule.
Yeah. Although it's based on. Oh no, that's right. The short story has a totally different name.
Yeah, the short story is called The Body.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, of course, Pretty Woman is inspired by a story that we'll be talking about a little later. But I was just wondering, like, as a creator and somebody who has written a lot of different works in different genres, do you think that instinct to name something comes at the last minute, or are you inspired early in the process to call something Pretty Woman or something like that? Like, where is the...
That's an interesting question because I guess it probably depends on your inspiration. I actually love starting with a title, but I don't typically, I don't like titling things. I don't think I've ever titled anything after a song, and I try not to go to, Shakespeare quotes or biblical quotes or things like that, because that's kind of tried and true. Sometimes it's really appropriate, but I try and sort of avoid that. I think if you have an idea for something, and in the course of writing it, you recall you come up with a song or a poem or something that really fits it. Yeah. I think that's so. In the process, you might come up with that, or perhaps the song actually inspires you. Inspires your idea for that. And I don't really have any notion of, I knew plenty of people who worked on Voyager, but I don't really have a notion. This was written the story was Brannon Braga.
Yes.
Right. And the script was Michael Taylor. I don't really have any idea how they were inspired to write this, whether the story came first or it sprung out of the song. They heard the song and they thought, this might be a good tale between the Doctor and Seven.
Yeah. I always wonder, with those movies that are bad, I always wonder if it, just the entire process of writing the script is not necessarily great because the movie doesn't turn out well. And then the last finishing touch is what do I call this thing? Oh, I guess I'll call it, One for the Road or however they come up with that final title. But I've noticed too, I have another theory that is in its early stages of infancy, which is episodes that are based, that are titled after songs of Star Trek tend to be pretty good. I mean, this is a pretty good example of one.
Yeah.
You have to stretch a little bit. Like there's a Voyager episode called Rise, which I really enjoy. It's the one where they're on the space elevator. And that's a Herb Alpert song. So, I mean, it's...
But I don't... Yeah, right. But I think I very much doubt that was titled after the song, right? But so you are stretching it. You are stretching it. But there are... Yeah, I mean, certainly Deep Space Nine made great use of music with Vic Fontaine.
Sure.
And what was... I'm trying to think of the title of the episode after Nog lost his leg. And
it's Only a Paper Moon, yeah.
It's Only a Paper Moon, there you go. Yeah, it's Star Trek. It's interesting. I think a lot of fans were initially sort of resistant to bringing in pop culture, even if it's older pop culture, into Star Trek.
Yeah.
But I think they've done an overall pretty good job of really broadening Star Trek's scope, I think, and it's to good effect. I've been pleased with it, and this episode was a good example of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this episode is Someone to Watch Over Me. Like I said, it's the 22nd episode of the 5th season of Star Trek Voyager. It first aired on April 28th of 1999. The teleplay is by Michael Taylor. Taylor got his start in television writing for DS9, penning the teleplays for episodes like The Visitor and In the Pale Moonlight. He wrote 20 episodes in total of Star Trek Voyager, and he went on to be a writer and producer for the Battlestar Galactica reboot and its sequel series Caprica, as well as the Dead Zone, Defiance, Turn, and Into the Badlands on AMC. The story is by Brandon Braga, who is, of course, a writer, producer, and co-creator of Star Trek Voyager. The episode was directed by Robert Duncan McNeill. McNeill first appeared in Star Trek as Cadet Nick Locarno in the TNG episode The First Duty, and went on to play Lieutenant Tom Paris for all 7 seasons of Voyager. He also directed 4 episodes of Voyager, as well as 4 Enterprise episodes, and he's gone on to a prolific career as a television director. The stardate for the episode is 52648.0, and your assignment, David, if you can, is to give us a 25-word synopsis of Someone to Watch Over Me.
Man, I really wish I remembered you did that before.
I do it every time.
I know, and I never remember, and then I'm on the spot. 25 words or fewer is not my strength.
Oh, no.
Said the man who wrote a 225,000-word Star Trek novel. Well, basically, Seven decides that she wants to explore human relationships, human mating rituals. Mating might be a bit strong, but dating rituals, let's say. And the doctor agrees to help her and then becomes smitten during the process.
Of course. That's perfect. And succinct, totally fits. I would say, maybe if you have to cut out articles or conjunctions or adjectives, but that was perfect. Here's some interesting facts from the memory banks about the episode. According to Robert Duncan McNeill, it was the writer's decision to not follow up on the romantic relationship broached between the Doctor and Seven in future episodes. Although I do think they make a nice couple. They also make a nice duo, as Robert Picardo and Jeri Ryan provided their own vocals for the singing in the episode. The episode was a favorite of many of the cast and crew who worked on it. Producer and writer Brandon Braga called the episode one of his favorites of the year, and showrunner Rick Berman described it as, quote, sweet, charming, funny, and poignant, unquote. Jeri Ryan said she was approached by editors on the set during the episode's post-production who praised the charming quality of the episode. She also remarked that the love story between Seven and the Doctor was lovely and touching, and the fact that Seven is unaware of the Doctor's affections at the end of the episode, quote, broke her heart. The conclusion of the episode had not been fully written when the shooting began, so care was taken by the actors and writers to develop the relationship between Seven and the Doctor gradually so it would culminate in that final scene. This is also the last time that the Shea Sandrine holoprogram is seen on screen, and the image of Fortress Ovum and the countless little warriors from the Doctor's Love Amid the Stars PowerPoint is a still from the 1989 movie Look Who's Talking. No idea how they got that.
Wow. That's some impressive research, Aaron.
It's a very specific... I mean, you could get a picture of an ovum and sperm anywhere, but they got it from the movie Look Who's Talking for some reason. So
I'm going to guess that maybe that's a Paramount film?
I looked it up, and I don't think it is. I think it is...
Oh!
Yeah, I think it's somebody else. So
wow.
That's the usual excuse for seeing stock footage from other movies on Star Trek. Let's talk about the guest stars in this episode. Scott Thompson appears as Toman. Thompson is perhaps best known for the Canadian sketch series The Kids in the Hall. He's also made regular appearances on The Larry Sanders Show, Hannibal, and The Simpsons. And Brian McNamara plays the role of Lieutenant William Chapman, the hapless date companion that Seven has. McNamara's first major role in Hollywood was in the 1984 film The Flaming Kid. He had a recurring role on the Fox series The OC, and he was a regular on the Lifetime series Army Wives, and he's had numerous guest roles on various TV shows. And let's talk about the meat of the episode itself. I think it seems somewhat obvious on watching the episode that the plot is lifted directly from the musical My Fair Lady, which was, of course, based on the George Bernard Shaw play Pygmalion, which itself was based on the Greek myth of Pygmalion and Galatea, with the Doctor in the Henry Higgins role in this case.
You know, and it's interesting because My Fair Lady, Best Picture, obviously, famous film, and Pygmalion, famous, and obviously the Greek myth. But I think this was. I think Someone to Watch Over Me, although it follows those beats, it's it's quieter. I mean, I said it was a quiet episode earlier. It's quieter in a very good way. It's just there's some subtlety to it, not to Scott Thompson and that B storyline, but with the Doctor and Seven, it's just the moment when Robert Picardo, when they're singing "You Are My Sunshine,"
yeah,
and he's got his eyes closed and they're singing, and then he opens his eyes and he sees her, and there's just this beat where it's subtle, it's not over the top, and it's sort of gone in a flash when she looks back at him, but you can see that he suddenly realized he's developed some feelings, and it's just, My Fair Lady was much broder, Pygmalion, right. Those stories are much broader. They're played, heavy-handedly, to good effect, but there's a quietness about this episode, a subtlety that actually makes it, I think, kind of believable. I mean, as far as you can talk about, Borg drones and holograms falling in love, it's believable.
Yeah, in the circumstances of this world, it certainly is. It's a plot that I wouldn't at first glance expect to work in a Star Trek setting, but I think Star Trek, as you said before, I think Star Trek shows a lot of latitude in that it can encompass plots like this. It's such a specific homage as well. There's certain elements that wouldn't necessarily be necessary, but they still add from, the original storyline, like the bet between Paris and the Doctor. Of course, that provides the sort of late second act turn, but you don't need to have that, have Tom be the Colonel Pickering in this case. But yet they've got all those beats from the original story that are still in the Voyager one.
Exactly, and it's the way it's played. It's almost sitcomish, at least in the beats that I mean, it's I get the Pickering, but it feels like okay, this also could have been lifted from an episode of Three's Company.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I want to see.
Right, yeah. But for all of that, I thought Robert Duncan Neal, as the actor in the scene, as Paris, did a pretty good job. He didn't seem to be over the top with it. I thought it was pretty well done. I wanted to ask you too. Speaking of, when you're talking about songs and things,
yeah,
I thought it was interesting that at the end, actually, when the Doctor is practicing revealing to Seven how he feels about her, so he's in the holodeck, and the audience doesn't know that it's the holodeck. It's led to believe that he's really talking to Seven,
right.
And he says to her with great poignance, "This past week has been unforgettable," and he says it with just deep meaning and conviction and deep emotion. I thought that the use of the word unforgettable, which of course is a famous song title,
sure.
Nat King Cole and his daughter both did fantastic renditions of it. I wondered if that was, I mean, unforgettable is the right word, is a perfect word there. Well, did they choose that word? They could have chosen any number of words to describe how the Doctor's experience with Seven had been over the course of their, but they chose unforgettable. And I just imagine that had to be intentional.
Yeah, I mean, he could have said, "I feel like I've got the world on a string," or something like that.
It
might be. I think you pointed out. I think I agree with your supposition that it's just the right word, and I don't necessarily think they meant to evoke another standard song.
You don't think so?
But I think it was sort of happenstance that I think they wrote it and they thought, oh wait, if somebody, you know what, if people do make that association, fine, we're willing to accept that. But I do think it's just the right word.
Yeah. Well, and what's great about it is that when he then actually sees Seven, when he's not in the holodeck practicing talking to her, and then he does talk to her and say, she reveals that, she's not going to be dating anymore because there's nobody suitable for her on the ship, which of course includes the Doctor. Yeah. He says, and she says, "Well, wait, you were going to say something to me." And he says, "Well, the last week with you has been unforgettable," and he just throws it away. It's even though they probably didn't film it close together, the two lines that he delivers are in close proximity in the episode, and the different inflections. It's just a thing of beauty to watch Robert Picardo at work, because I mean he just makes them both readings work. And it's heartbreaking the second time when he doesn't get to really tell her how he feels. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that fake out ending where he's confessing his love to her, but it's just a holosuite character, that's a really great use of the holodeck, of the future technology, of the sci-fi setting, being able to do something that, if it was, say, a sitcom or something like that, would be a dream sequence or some kind of monologue, but being able to use that as to just show, oh, wow, we get to see like how painful that is for him. And you get that emotional catharsis between them, but the status quo of this show that has to be episodic every week doesn't change.
Right. Yeah. It's they did a fine job with it. I thought it was that storyline, the A story, was extremely well written, and I thought Robert Duncan McNeill did a really good job directing it, and of course Jeri Ryan, and in particular Robert Picardo, really carried the ball. I mean, they did a great job.
Yeah, and an episode that he directed, of course, and was in too. I mean, he could have made it. I guess it wouldn't make quite as much sense to have Harry Kim make a bet with the Doctor. Although they continue, there's that connection between Harry Kim and Seven that they kept trying to push, where you know he wanted to date her, and then he was kind of mad at her because they couldn't date, and maybe he would have fit in that. But yeah, just having himself in it a little bit, but not take over the episode was a good move, I think, for him. Something else I didn't realize until I was preparing for the episode is that the B plot of the episode, where Neelix tries and fails to keep Tommen, the Kadi ambassador, in line, is very similar to another movie, the plot of the film My Favorite Year, starring Peter O'Toole and Mark Lynn Baker, in which Baker's character, who's a TV sketch writer, has to keep O'Toole's character, a drunken aging movie star, from going off the rails before a TV appearance. And that film, of course, is based in part on executive producer Mel Brooks' experience writing for Sid Caesar and Your Show of Shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but you're exactly right. Although I think My Favorite Year did it to greater effect.
Well, yes.
I like Scott Thompson. I like him in general. I loved him in Kids in the Hall and Larry Sanders Show. He's a good comedic actor. But I think he was miscast in this role. Perhaps he just couldn't rise to the occasion, or perhaps he wasn't directed, or perhaps they got exactly what they wanted and it just wasn't to my taste. But it was a little over the top for me.
It certainly was. That's kind of what worked for me, though.
Yeah.
We've talked before on previous episodes about the kind of necessary ostentatiousness of Trek, of these amazing future humans who don't know what money is and whatnot.
Right.
And I relish every chance that they get to not completely change the show so it's Tom Paris, cruising around in his Ford F-150, but to kind of pop that bubble and put some fun stuff in. And so that's why I thought the sitcom-y elements of that worked a little bit, even though, Voyager's just watching this ambassador just break down and basically lose his mind and just go off the deep end. Like, you think somebody would step in. They just leave it. They just leave it to Neelix to watch this guy stumble around.
Particularly Chakotay, since he's still on the ship.
Right, yeah.
But I do have to ask, Paris in a Ford F-150, not a Mustang?
Oh, well, I mean...
Come on.
There is something about a Ford truck, though. I think when they go back in time to San Francisco in the 90s, he's driving a Ford something.
Yeah, right. I watched the episode twice, actually, in preparation for talking with you today. And the first time I watched it, I thought Scott Thompson was just way over the top. And the second time I watched it, I was able to enjoy it more, his performance more. And I thought it worked better than I had thought initially. But it's not quite to my taste. And it was, and the head of his government who transports to the ship and then goes back with Tuvok and Janeway.
Right.
That's Ian Abercrombie, right? From I think probably best known for his role as Mr. Pitt on Seinfeld. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
That was interesting to me because it was kind of a thankless role. It was in and out.
Yeah. Pretty much. And it's also kind of a fizzle to the conflict. I mean, we don't want to send Scott Thompson back to this world where he'll be miserable forever, but
right.
They build up so much that it's these abstemious monks, who have to be careful what they do. And the guy's like, have a little fun. What a little height.
Yeah. And You brought up the actor who played William Chapman. I actually thought he did a pretty good job. I thought he was fairly charming in his attempt to date Seven.
Yeah, I agree. And you can see his nervousness, but you also see that he really wants to make this work because, I mean, he's landed 7 of 9. I'm sure, we don't hear the scuttlebutt on the ship, but I'm sure everybody is very impressed, with how attractive and capable she is. And I like how kind of broken he is at the end of the scene after she's literally like broken his arm.
Well, literally broken, yeah.
And he's just like, can we do this later? I just can't take it. I got lobster all over me.
Yeah, I thought that was, it was just, he was, when he escorts her over to the table, and she has to look to the doctor and say that, should I take his arm? He's offering me his arm, and
Yes.
the doctor nods, yes, so she takes his arm, and then he pulls her chair out for her to help her, and she just completely doesn't even see it and just takes it because she's just in charge of her own life. She's not used to any sort of chivalrous actions, not even aware of them.
Yeah.
So I thought that was, and he just kind of, the attitude that he gives, okay, and it just sits, and of course we're told by Paris earlier in the episode that Chapman is notoriously anxious around women, and so that really sets this up. On top of that, he's not just some confident guy who just steps in and sweeps her off her feet. Would that were possible, but he's not that. And so he's anxious when he's and nervous when he goes out with her. And I thought he played it in a very sweet and charming way. And it was also not heartbreaking in the way that it was with the doctor at the end, but it was a little sad that he's trying very hard, and you watch him just realize, this isn't quite what I wanted it to be.
Right. And also he's one of 2 people that Seven picked based on her criteria, and now this one's out. So it's also sort of tragic because it's like, I hope she does find somebody. There's nobody else on board.
Well, and it's unfortunate because if you told me the plot of this episode before the episode, I would have thought the Doctor and Seven, that does not make a lot of sense. But it was so well written and so well played that when the episode was over, it felt like a little tragedy that they actually didn't get together because they did seem well suited to each other. For one thing, they're both outsiders, right?
Yeah.
And Star Trek really, from its inception with Spock and then on to Data and Odo, it really has this track record of dealing with people who don't feel like they fit in, in part because they're not, I'm not from around here.
Yeah.
I'm not like you. And I've had different experiences than you, and yet I'm around all of you, So Star Trek deals with that a lot. And there's, to watch 2 outsider type characters come together and realize, well, the audience realizes that, they are a pretty good match. This does make some sense, and I would never have guessed that before seeing the episode that it would work the way it did.
Yeah, I suppose on Voyager we have that with Paris and Taurus in a way, where Paris is the guy who is not cut out for Starfleet, doesn't really fit in, and Taurus is somebody who emotionally is and just culturally is trying to find an identity, and they kind of find each other in that same way. Right.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense. Although you still, yeah. I mean, I think Paris and Torres, I think they try to fit in, and I think they do find their place. I mean, it seems to me that the Doctor is always awkward and always fighting to have his place, and the same is true of Seven. But yeah, I mean, I can see the outsider status of Paris and Torres. What's interesting about this episode too is just the almost complete absence of Janeway and Tuvok and Chakotay.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, they're there for their residual and gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it does play out sort of in the margins, or while the authority figures are away, we're doing this instead, learning dating lessons.
Yeah,
This episode is, in a way, an homage to My Fair Lady, and I think pastiche or homage gets used in all mediums, but you tend to see it a lot in weekly TV, I think. And there's often so many episodes that you have to do in a TV series, and each one, at least in this era of TV, had to be a self-contained story. So it's convenient to find a classic plot or a setup and put your characters into it. I'm always looking out for familiar plots when I watch genre TV, like, oh, they're doing a Rashomon, or oh, look, they're doing Moby Dick. Yeah. And I think modern TV is doing this less and less because shows are more comfortable with long-running plots and serialization. So I think you end up borrowing some elements, but I think it's tougher to do a specific homage when you've got to keep the story going week to week.
I think you're right. I think television obviously has changed dramatically in the last decade. I mean, Reed Hastings has changed what television is. The head of Netflix. It's interesting because so many TV shows out there now are high concept, which used to be a very rare thing. They're serialized, which used to be a rare thing, and they can be any number of episodes, right?
Right.
So whatever tells the story. But that serial nature of the 6, 8, 10, 12 episode seasons, to me, they feel like chapters in a book. I mean, that's often the way these shows play out now. You'll have a season that, in some ways, because of the beginning, the middle, and the end of the season, the story arcs, the character arcs, very much plays out like a novel.
Yeah.
And that, to me, not just as a writer but as a reader, that just appeals to me. Just as a lover of storytelling, I just really like that. But when back in the day, when they were making Voyager, it was very much your 18, 20, 22 episodes a season, and you do have to be, Voyager was somewhat serialized in that they had, we're trying to get home.
Yeah.
It's, we're Gilligan's Island in space. Right. So, but they did have to have the self-contained episodes. And so, go and say, let's do My Fair Lady this week. Although it's interesting because who would watch My Fair Lady and think The Doctor and Seven? I think that's the thing that's really unusual about it. I think I would almost have picked any other two characters, but I don't think it would have worked as well as the two that they chose.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah. And you look at the way that TV is going, and there are a lot of positive things, aspects to these serialized long-running stories, like you said, from a storytelling perspective. But part of me still sort of misses the 5-act structure of a 42-minute episode. And I'm sure it'll never go away. And this sounds like complaining that, they don't make wax cylinders like they used to anymore. But, I just like this weird, if it does almost go away or die or become sort of archaic, we have this record of this weird time where we got really good at telling stories in 5 acts, in between commercials for 40 minutes or so, or in 22 minutes or so on TV.
It's interesting, though, because I do see a lot of these shorter season serialized television shows that still play out in a 4 or 5 act structure. You can see, particularly when you're watching episodes that are 42 minutes long on Netflix or whatever, you're thinking, okay, they've structured this to eventually make its way over to broadcast television. And they because you see the beats before what would be commercial breaks, and there's enough time. You're doing a 42-minute episode. That's plenty. That's 18 minutes of commercials we can put in if we throw this on network television.
Yeah.
So I think I who knows? I doubt that we'll ever lose it entirely. I mean, you still have network television, but I think it's even though there's all of this high concept serialized storytelling, there still is enough episodic stuff being done, at least right now. And it seems to me people like that enough that it's a commitment to kind of want to watch something serialized, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes people don't want to make that commitment.
Yeah. I think my favorite form of the medium at this point is the sort of hybrid between like the two styles. Something like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul have these long meta plots that whenever a new season starts, I have to watch a YouTube video to like remind me what happened before.
Sure.
But yet every episode still it opens with something, and that is sort of describing what we're going to be dealing with over this hour of TV, and then it usually ends in some way that satisfies whatever that was. But we know that the story is going to continue. Like the main conflict isn't over.
Well, that also points up another difficulty with the current sort of structure of the new television, which is, the shorter season serialized things. Also, that you binge, right? When Netflix or Hulu, whoever drops all episodes in a season at once. So you spend a week or two watching 10 episodes of a season, and you're done. And then you don't get to see the next season for a year and a half, which is different than when you were watching episodic television, as a kid or a young adult or whatever, and you would watch it from September to May.
Yeah, that summer break was long enough.
you'd have the 3 months, but when the 3 months were over, because you'd also stayed with these characters over the course of a 9-month season, you kept in your head everything that was going on.
Right.
3 months off, and then you come back and you're like, you still remembered everything. Now, you watch 10 episodes in 2 weeks, and a year and a half later, you get the next season. You're like, wait a minute, who was that? What did they do? What happened?
That's exactly true.
You saying going back to watch a YouTube recap of stuff, that makes sense.
Yeah. There are like TOS, TNG, and most of DS9. I can remember. You point out an episode, I can tell you what episode it was and what season and what was going on. Voyager, which is a series that I've watched mostly, later on in streaming, and definitely Enterprise. They all kind of run together, and it's hard to remember exactly how far they are from home and what hairstyle Janeway has.
Right, sure. And what was interesting is Deep Space Nine really, the Next Generation played a little bit with serialized storytelling, but only in a very minor way. Mm-hmm. Deep Space Nine was, I think, the first Star Trek series to really go heavy with that. With the serialization. And, of course, it still had its episodic. Mostly it was episodic. And, even in the course of the serialization, it had to be episodic. But they had the longer story arcs. And some people didn't like that, and some viewers did. And I relished it. But, like anything, it depends on how well you do it, right?
Yeah, definitely. It depends on who you ask. You were talking about sort of sampling plots and the repetition of storylines. Many literary theorists or narratologists, if that's a word, claim that there's only X amount of stories, basic stories or premises. I've heard 7.
You hear 4, you hear 5, you hear 7. Man versus
31,
man versus himself, man versus nature. Yeah.
Everything can be boiled down to a stock plot, supposedly, that recurs again and again in human storytelling. But as somebody who's written a lot of fiction yourself, what are your thoughts on that premise?
I understand it, and it may even be true to some extent, but in order to make it true, you really have to generalize,
Okay.
You can boil any, you can take Robinson Crusoe and say, that's man versus nature, right?
Yeah.
But Robinson Crusoe is very different than Wild, which is the Reese Witherspoon movie where she walks, was it the Oregon Trail? Whatever she walked, and finding herself. And you could say that these are the same story, but they play out very, very differently. And with different beats, and so I don't really buy into the notion. Like I say, you can generalize any story to fit some one of these categories, but stories can be very, very different. And so I don't know. I know this. When I'm writing, I have never once thought, I'm going to do a man versus man story or a man versus himself story. I never think about it. I don't think in those
straight
terms.
Man versus man, yeah.
Yeah. I actually usually when I'm writing, I start thematically. You get 10 writers in a room, you have 12 different processes, but my process typically is thinking, what is it I want to talk about? What do I feel like talking about?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's very thematic, my starting point. But it's not. I try and let the things I want to talk about and the characters that are involved sort of dictate how the story develops. So I want to try and develop it in a natural fashion.
Sure.
At no time do any of these 4, 5, 7 stories, whatever it is, do they come into play when I'm mapping out a story. They just don't.
Yeah, it just sounds like a good way to sell a book on narrative theory, basically.
Right, yeah. Right,
I got 99 plots. Yeah, right. Speaking of Trek episodes that draw on other media for inspiration, I guess I should mention that I have another Star Trek podcast called Backtrekking that's committed to doing just that. On the show, my co-host and I choose an episode of Trek, and we discuss the episode alongside the real-world event or piece of media that inspired it. So, for example, we talked on the show recently about the Voyager episode Macrocosm, which is a clear homage to Alien. And we talked about, like Die Hard inspiring the TNG episode Starship Mine. So if that sounds interesting, listeners, check that out.
Yeah, actually, I didn't know that. That does sound interesting.
Are there any
I like your other two podcasts, whether or not I'm on them.
Sure, yeah. Right. So. We just talked about Apocalypse Now and The Wounded on TNG. And tried to. I don't think it's an explicit.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's explicit. I don't think I heard Renee Echeverria say that he, was specifically looking at Apocalypse Now. But there's a clear, parallel to the idea of a military commander who's kind of gone off the deep end, and they have to go up the river to talk him down. Right. Yeah, we made a meal out of that. So yeah, check that out.
And of course, Apocalypse Now, right straight out of Heart of Darkness.
That's right. We actually read Heart of Darkness for the show too.
Right.
I think as Trek has gone on and added more installments to its canon, I think it's found it fruitful or perhaps necessary to start looking to other media for inspiration in storytelling. And I think also looking back to itself, I think the later Berman era series, Voyager and Enterprise, show that the most. The early series weren't above homage at all, but I feel like sometimes Voyager is the first fanfic series of Trek, and I don't mean that in a totally negative way. I just think it's the first series to really try to self-evaluate the premise of Trek itself. TOS is the original, TNG is more TOS but with a deeper emotional spectrum and storytelling. DS9 is its own different thing. It's a meditation on faith and war, but Voyager is a reaction to the original premise of Star Trek of exploring space with endless prosperity. Right. But in this case, they're lost, they're out of food and supplies, and the humanist ideals aren't always the answer. In fact, sometimes they make things worse. And I don't think the creators and writers of the series, they're not going off in a totally new direction, but they're consciously creating a response to earlier Trek in the shadow of earlier Trek, like a fanfic writer, a good fanfic writer, but a fanfic writer.
No, I know what you're saying. I think you're exactly right. I do think trying to draw on inspiration from other tales or songs or what have you also serves to broaden Star Trek. And Star Trek is it's funny because it can be very specific, especially for people who don't watch Star Trek. If you try and talk to them about the details of the show, it can feel incredibly specific.
Yeah.
But Star Trek, of course, as we talked about earlier, its premise, its themes are all about inclusiveness. And if you're broadening out to, now you're bringing in My Fair Lady or Apocalypse Now, Heart of Darkness, whatever, you're sort of broadening the scope of the show to include other, not just pop culture, but culture. I think that broadens the appeal of the show as well, trying essentially to actually include everybody in the audience, or potential audience.
Yeah, certainly. I think the real tragedy of Voyager and Enterprise, though, is that they never really accomplish, well, in Voyager for sure, I don't think they accomplish much by trying to deconstruct the premise of Trek. I think that Federation ideals do tend to be the right answer every week, just like in the Alpha Quadrant. And all the aliens are just humans with increasingly elaborate foreheads.
Right.
And I know that the network oversight kept the show from getting all that weird from week to week, but if there was ever a chance to make some Trek that was really unique and unfamiliar, that was it. I mean, it ends up being pretty recognizable in the sum of the thing.
I think Voyager in particular, you're right. That was the opportunity, and it's unfortunate that they ended up not going as far, I think, as they could. The episode of Voyager that I co-wrote, which is called Prime Factors, which is, depending on how you count, the 9th or 10th episode of the first season.
Right.
One of the things, the basic premise of the episode was to have the Federation, these Starfleet officers, have their own ideals turned back on themselves.
Sure.
Right? Because it's about them coming upon a race that has technology that get them, if not all the way home, at least a lot closer to the Alpha Quadrant. But the alien race won't share because they don't have their own prime directive.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that I love. I do like exploring the Federation ideals, but I agree with you that I don't think Voyager and Enterprise quite. I don't want to say they paid lip service to the ideals. They brought them up, but they didn't. I don't think they did really in-depth explorations of them. It was a lot of references here and there, but they didn't really, I don't think, test things out in a way that they could have.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly like my favorite episodes of Voyager are doing that. Episodes like Prime Factors, or episodes like Scorpion, where Janeway is like, well, what if we make an alliance with the Borg? Like, what if we do the unthinkable to get my 145 people home?
Right.
Love and romance are subjects on Trek, as they'd be in any popular medium. But I think on Trek, love and romance are often involved in cautionary tales of the complication of relationships between races or species or even coworkers. I'm not sure if it's because Trek is a military setting, but I feel like often the love stories or romance stories have a sort of didactic kind of finger-shaking feel to them. And I think those elements are somewhat present in the Seven Doctor pairing. It's a fairly straightforward romantic story, but when we get to the end, I mean, I don't think the audience has any real objection towards them getting together. I mean, your personal mileage may vary whether you think they're right for each other, but I think the impulse for us is to want to see them get together by the end.
Sure, I think it's because you see the genuine emotion in the Doctor.
Yeah.
And you can see how that they are actually suited to each other. Something that I would have not, like I said before the episode, I didn't think this would work, and it worked completely. But I don't think it's so much the cautionary tales of romance. I don't think I don't think it's because of some sort of certainly puritanical finger wagging. It's not. I don't think it's any of that. I think it has more to do with storytelling over the course of a series.
Okay.
Because I mean, if you look at Next Generation, right, there was always a chemistry between Picard and Crusher, Beverly, and they had a history, right?
Yeah.
And they occasionally would reference it, but they clearly stayed away from it. But I don't think it's because a superior shouldn't get together with somebody who is under their command, or I think it's because once we hook up Picard with Beverly, then these are heroes, so presumably they're not going to be cheating on each other, which means they're dedicated to each other, which means what happens if we have an episode we want to do where Picard has this romance with somebody else, right? Then what do we do? Do we have to break them up first? It just adds a lot of complications to a television series storytelling that it's like minutia in a way, right? If we want to do this episode with Beverly getting involved with somebody or Picard getting involved with somebody, but they're together, we have to do something beforehand to make it acceptable. If it's not acceptable, then we have to deal with the fallout. And these are things that they kind of sometimes just take up too much air.
Interesting.
For the storytelling that you actually want to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe I'm looking.
So I think it's sort of a more practical writing thing that has Star Trek sort of frowning on romance.
Maybe
in a way.
I'm looking through the wrong end of the telescope, maybe, because the practicality might be that we don't want to get our characters tied up in something, but the net effect is it seems like Picard's just really got problems with relationships. Like he just can't ever really be with anybody.
It's funny because when I wrote Crucible, the original series trilogy, I wrote a McCoy book and a Spock book and a Kirk book, and I tried, when I sat down to write them, I was like, well, what do we not know about these characters? And I watched the original series from beginning to end, and the animated show, and all of the films that included original series characters. And when I was done with it, I kind of realized that, wow, McCoy just has no love life, right? He just, and it's he's got Natira in For the World Is Hollow, but there's an occasional dally. I mean, there are the two women on the shore leave planet.
Yes.
but they're sort of, and Tanya, what's her name? From shore leave, the ensign there that he seems to be involved with. But there's nothing that continues for McCoy, and he doesn't really talk about relationships at all. We don't know within the context of the show, but outside the show, we know McCoy is supposed to be divorced, and that drove him to space and all of that.
Yeah.
But just the storytelling, which really made McCoy into something of a loner on the show, which I don't think was anybody's intention. I just think it was an artifact of the storytelling. This is just something that if you look closely enough, this is what developed, even though nobody intended this to develop. And I think that can happen, maybe less so now because shows are more sort of serialized. When you watch the original series, when they make reference to a previous episode, it's a shock because it only happens a couple of times.
Yeah, right.
And it's sort of delightful in a way watching it when they do make reference to on a Meteor 7, you tricked the guard, and Kirk says to Spock,
right.
but it's can you do that again? But that it almost never happened.
Yeah.
So I mean, the original series was so severely episodic that it's kind of nice when you get that continuity reference. But these things, especially in episodic television, happen. These, like I say, McCoy develops as something of a loner, although I'm completely sure nobody had that intention.
Yeah, that's probably true. I really wish that we could have. Maybe this just wouldn't have been fodder for 60s primetime TV, but I wish we could have seen more of his life and his post-divorce and how he deals with that. An episode where he has to meet, talk to his ex-wife or something like that. Just getting more depth of that character.
They had intended that, had they not? I think Dorothy Fontana had intended. Wasn't there an episode, Joanna, or something that I don't know if it was written or?
Oh.
I do believe they had something.
Okay.
The animated series had Joanna, his daughter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it would have been nice, and maybe if the show had gone more than 3 seasons, they eventually would have done that. But
yeah,
that also wasn't. It wasn't how Star Trek was. I mean, Star Trek. It would be interesting to sort of see the original series in a serialized format sort of today. I mean, I know they've done the films with the recasting, but with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and all, but to watch a series of Kirk and Spock and McCoy where they could expand and we could explore their lives more. And of course, some of the films did that, right? I mean, we got to see that Kirk had a son,
right,
and how that, and when people like characters, they want to know more about them. And by knowing more about characters, by understanding, Kirk has a son and he had a failed romance and he doesn't get to see his son. Well, people can empathize with that, or at the very least sympathize with that. And that, people like that. I mean, that's why people like storytelling because it informs their lives, it informs them about society, about other people, and it's kind of a big deal. So, but that's, it's not just Star Trek. That's just not the way episodic television was in the 60s.
Yeah, that's true. There's an idea that I've been kind of kicking around, and I've been asking some guests about it, which is, Star Trek was canceled at the end of its 3rd season, and as we know from later Star Trek shows, like many Star Trek series really find their feet in their 3rd season, and then the 4th season is great. They really take off. And I've been wondering what a 4th season of TOS would be like. And it begins like a dream. You're like, oh, how strong could that be? But then I remember that Star Trek was taking place at one of the most tumultuous times in American history, which we are doing our best to sort of replicate now, but it's, still a big deal. So like a 1969 to 1970 Star Trek series, I have to wonder how far they would try to dig into counterculture and what's going on. And I don't know. The people behind the show, not all of them, but some of them, I think we might get like a pro-Vietnam speech from Captain Kirk. I don't think that it would be what we want necessarily. I'm not sure they would land on the right side of history if they're going to do allegorical storytelling.
Well, of course, there was a private little war in the original series, which Kirk really did come down sort of in a pro-Vietnam way, and was just freaking wrong, at least the way I read it.
Yeah.
And there was Errand of Mercy, in which he's, telling, complaining to the games, we have the right to wage war, Captain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Kirk's got to, actually, that's one of the things I did like about the original series is Kirk was occasionally wrong, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
The thing about, from a practical standpoint, I understand the point that you're making, but from a practical standpoint, Star Trek, the original Star Trek, went in the other direction from Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. Star Trek hit its stride early in the first season, and the first season is probably, at least to my way of thinking, the superior season. And the second season was also very good, and we had the actors getting really comfortable with the characters. Yeah. But Star Trek was canceled after its second season and revived.
Right.
But Gene Roddenberry and the other of the writing staff didn't survive that cancellation revival.
Yeah, yeah.
So we had Fred Freiberger producing the third season, and Star Trek's weakest episodes, are all over the third season.
Yeah. Well, I just think that if it could have, I guess more, you'd have to wave your wand a couple of times to make this work. But if it could have had stronger ratings, or the network could have measured those ratings in a better way and had picked up momentum or kept momentum in the third season into a fourth season, I don't know. Maybe now that it's more of an establishment, you see people like Gene Kuhn and DC Fontana drifting back to the show. Maybe, after Tarzan doesn't get made and Pretty Maids All in a Row fails, right, Roddenberry decides to see what's going on the TV side,
And I think Roddenberry was not necessarily the best storyteller in the world, but he was a good shepherd of people who did tell stories.
Yeah, yeah.
Well. And I think, that first season, one of the reasons it was so strong, I think, is they didn't just have strong television writers. They reached out to strong science fiction writers, people who were writing prose.
Yeah.
They had, Norman Spidrad doing Wolf in the Fold and the Doomsday Machine. Yeah. And I mean, that was in the second season. But I mean, they did reach out. They had, Richard Matheson doing The Enemy Within. And I think that helped the show a lot, too. I mean, I will say this, too, in rewatching the original series from stem to stern, one of the episodes that I had always despised, I watched with sort of new eyes, because you were talking about what would a fourth season and maybe addressing the counterculture look like. There's an episode that not only did I despise, but many people despised. And when I watched it again, I thought, you know what? There's a lot of good stuff in this episode, even as it ends poorly. It's actually, there's a lot good in here, and I was surprised to think that. And I've mentioned it to a few people, and none of them have agreed with me. But it's The Way to Eden.
Okay.
Which is absolutely, a counterculture, but they're really. It's surprisingly, I mean, it's kind of cornball, and it does not end well.
Right.
But actually there is stuff in there that really is talking about the current day, and it's actually pretty fascinating if you give it a chance. You can't make that happen with Spock's brain, but you can make it happen with The Way to Eden.
Oh, we just got done talking about Spock's brain in another episode. The Way to Eden, it's that ending is a problem, because I think that there are there's a lot of positivity that we associate with Charles Napier and his band of merry idiots. But they're being led by, a Maharishi type, that we're obviously the show is, we don't like this guy, but there's also sort of, I feel like that's that fine. It could break both ways, because it seems like, Spock is hanging out with Charles Napier and playing the lute, and that's cool. But then what they want is self-destructive. And that's the metaphor for like, oh, where are these hippies going to end up? Where's this counterculture going to lead to? And so that's
right. Well, and that's the leadership aspect there, right? I mean, because they seem good-hearted. The merry members of Skip Homeyer's tribe seem like they have their hearts in the right place, and they want things in a positive way, but he's a madman.
Yeah.
He didn't have to be a madman.
No, but I feel like they could have just as easily ended up on a poisoned planet, like without his help or leadership.
Right. But I'm not sure that that's really I mean, that's not the message I would have wanted to tell, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's still, there's a lot more to that episode than I thought there was.
I could see that. The episode that we're supposed to be talking about, Someone to Watch Over Me. In that episode, Paris refers to the Doctor educating Seven on romance as the blind leading the blind, which is an expression that, when you consider that in the 24th century, a blind man is the chief engineer of the Federation flagship, that seems a little outdated. However,
right.
I do appreciate the sentiment. The Doctor he has emotional intelligence, but not quite enough to see how absurd his lessons are. And I think of it as like kids dressing up in their parents' clothes and having like a tea party, like some of the interactions between him and Seven, which I think are really endearing. But I'm not sure, clearly the lessons aren't that successful.
Right. Well, you know what? I'm not sure that that's entirely true because, well, you know what? They succeeded for him, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
And really sort of, the Doctor's not the only one playing dress up. It's Seven as well. Yeah. I mean, neither one of them really, he doesn't see the absurdity of some of his lesson plans, but neither does she.
Yeah.
Right? And I get the sense throughout the entire episode that 7 of 9 is not having problems with the dating rituals and all of this for any particular reason other than inexperience and mostly fear.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, she seems like a character who when she knows what she's talking. When she's talking about quantum mechanics, she's golden, right? She can go toe to toe with anybody. But she's talking about something about which she has no knowledge or insufficient knowledge. It's scary, right? I mean, she wouldn't put it that way, but she does even say when she sits down, when Chapman on their date says, that he was nervous, she says, I am unfamiliar with dating as well, and so I am experiencing anxiety as a result. I think she gets that anxiety is throughout the entire episode, even if it's buried and if she doesn't want to admit it. And I think that's really why she gives up at the end, not because there's nobody suitable, but because it has not gone well for her.
Yeah, and
right?
it's not worth the
effort. She feels embarrassed by it. She feels she doesn't want to do something she's not good at.
Yeah, I love the fact that there is a lot of showing and not telling too in that depiction. Usually in a show like this that's aiming at a wide audience, you get a character saying, I don't feel comfortable doing this because I don't know. They'll tell you the whole thing.
Sure.
And yet the episode opens with her spying on Tom and B'Elanna, ostensibly for scientific purposes, but we know that throughout the entire episode we'll see that she can't even express this longing that she has, this loneliness that she feels. And I just think that's great. That's not what you would usually get out of really straightforward storytelling.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's also a good note to mention is that really, I was talking about, her discomfort comes from fear, but her initial discomfort, which leads her to study Tom and B'Elanna, is loneliness.
Yeah.
And I mean, they never talk about that, but it's pretty clear.
Oh, yeah.
Right? She is an outsider, and the Doctor suffers from the same thing.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
It's really, it just amazingly makes so much sense for them to have this, meeting of the minds. They go together well. They would, even when they were together, they made an interesting couple. I mean, and actually it was sort of when she let her guard down, right? Maybe when both of them let their guard down, when they initially go to the reception.
Yeah.
She takes his arm, and it's interesting. He says, we're having the reception. It'd be good for you to, as an exercise, to do this. And she says, are you asking me on a date? And he says, I guess I am. And she says, in that case, I accept. And it's all. You don't get that anxiety from her.
Yeah.
Because she's familiar with the Doctor, right? And
right.
And because he talks to her, she even says this. You and I, we get along a lot better because we just are straightforward and to the point.
Yeah.
And so she's comfortable, and but she even then takes the time to say, "Am I dressed sufficiently for this event?"
Right.
And he says, "Yes, you look perfect." And
at the event itself, she performs perfectly. She handles herself well. She charms everyone with the speech and everything. And I almost feel like the doctor may have created his own monster here, because after all of his lessons and all of his telling her what to think and expect, she may actually have enjoyed it a little bit. She might feel, like she enjoys the doctor's company. And yet, when she's self-evaluating herself for, have I made a love match or not, she doesn't see what she's supposed to see or thinks she's supposed to see. And so it increases that just sort of tragedy of her walking out of the holodeck at the end, maybe ready to have a relationship on a different sort of terms, different level or different terms than what the doctor has been describing this entire time with his 57 lessons about whatever. Like they kind of they kind of pass each other.
Well, what he's describing and also what she imagines, because she doesn't really know, right? So she's evaluating potential matches by what? Looking at their resumes?
Yeah.
Looking at their
right. Yeah.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's not the way to find romance, but she doesn't even know that.
Yeah, that's right. There's that thing in films where you've got the character who's like a high schooler or a teenager, and they want this storybook romance, and then the guy who's their friend the entire time they don't realize is perfect for them, and hopefully by the end of the movie they do. But in this case, it's just a tragedy because they don't. I'm always impressed by the range of Robert Picardo as an actor. We see him be sort of persnickety and short as the Doctor so much, and I just kind of feel like, oh, that's Robert Picardo. And then I see him in, I don't know, The Howling or a million other things that he's done, and he does make
Howling. Wow.
Yeah. He
Yikes.
He does get he gets a lot of mileage out of that character. I think he gets cast as that type of person a lot, but there's a lot that he is capable of. I can't remember the name of the episode where the Doctor turns evil, like his program gets corrupted somehow and he becomes like the white-eyed like evil Doctor. It's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde sort of reference. But yeah, he's just so scary and he just seems so anodyne as the Doctor, and suddenly like he's this like lurking villain. It's like, this guy's pretty good at what he does.
He's a very, very versatile actor, and I think you see some of that in Someone to Watch Over Me, the episode we're nominally talking about.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the beat when he realizes he has feelings for Seven, and then a couple of other times throughout the episode, his work is just, it's very, very subtle.
Very subtle.
But you talk about show, don't tell.
Yeah.
And he absolutely does that. You can see what he's thinking. You can see what he's feeling. And it's very different than, as you say, the anodyne Doctor. You get another layer to this character, and it's just that what the shame is that Seven has the longing for this layer and can't get there.
Yeah,
right. She can't get to this, get to sort of discover what she needs. How to have a relationship, or how to, even. I mean, people don't always date and then get married. They date and just have fun.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's go see a movie together. So there are so many things where she's just missing out, and it's unfortunate. And of course, it's because of the way she has lived her life, the way her life has been ripped away from her, and then had her reinserted into the society without proper socialization, really.
Yeah. And, I was just thinking about the fact, once again, another episode that isn't this episode, but an episode like In Theory, where Data is learning to date and learning or trying to learn how to be like an adequate partner. This is, you could think of this as a retread of that, but again, by looking at a previous story or an homage to something else, they find new depth and they don't end up repeating, the same bits.
Well, I think in part because In Theory is a great title for that episode, because with Data, it is theoretical, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't have emotions at that point. He's Pinocchio. He wants to be the real boy.
Right.
But he's not. Seven is a real woman, but
doesn't think of herself.
She doesn't know
as
how
one.
to be a real woman,
right?
right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of similar, but it's also in a way turned on its head a little bit.
Sure.
So
yeah. As we hit the end of the episode here, was there anything else that you wanted to mention about this episode that we hadn't got to yet?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it and
this
then
and other ones. Yes.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. No, it was. I like it's a bottle show. Which sometimes those can be problematic, but it was really a good idea, I think, to cast Chakotay and Janeway and Tuvok to the margins, and focus in a really detailed way on Seven and the Doctor, because it really allowed. I mean, they had more screen time, they had more story time, and it really allowed the story to develop in a way that, again, forgetting about photons and force fields and Borg implants, a believable story.
Yeah.
It developed in a way. It wasn't too quick. It wasn't too slow. It developed at a pace that really allowed you to get into the episode.
Yeah, I really love the fact that this isn't really what I would think about coming to a sci-fi series for at the first, an episode about romance and characters trying to date or find their feelings. You come for the lasers and the shooting and all that. But yeah, the fact that Voyager at this point in its life can still deliver an episode like this that really takes you off guard and is kind of touching, is a good sign. It's a good sign. I like Voyager. It's a good show.
It's all part of the human adventure, right?
Right.
I mean, romance is part of the human adventure.
Sure.
Feelings, emotions. It's a big, and that's been a mainstay of things Star Trek talks about from the beginning with Spock, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's not. I agree with you that it's not something you'd expect, but it somehow fits perfectly.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I like speculating on how different captains would handle the conflicts that come up in an episode. But Janeway spends most of the episode off the ship with the Cadi. I know that Kirk is your favorite captain, so I guess I want to know, how badly do you think Kirk would ruin the Cadi Society, a world dedicated to abstemiousness, with his visit?
Well, yeah, Kirk would have
turned that place upside down.
He would have wanted to show them the error of their ways and everything that they're missing.
Yeah.
And, it's Kirk gets a bad rap, and some of that actually comes from that dreadful third season, when the storytelling and the writing were just really often subpar. I mean, the Cadi and Kirk. Kirk, a lot of times, particularly in the first two seasons, was very respectful of other cultures. Not a private little war, but
yeah.
Most other episodes he was very respectful, and certainly Picard was that way as well. And I mean, you saw Riker wearing a dress, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Was it Angel 1,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. How about Sisko? What would Sisko make of the Cadi?
That's a good question. He's already in a position where he gets this posting in the middle of nowhere, and then he goes down to the planet and somebody's tugging on his ear all of a sudden. And I guess he handles that pretty well.
Yeah.
I guess that's part of a Starfleet officer's training. I mean, you have to be that way.
Well, again, it speaks to the ideals of the show itself, right? The ideals of Starfleet and the Federation are the ideals of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right. Don't interfere. Let's not have in other words, let's not have another Vietnam on our hands.
Yeah.
All of these things, and the notion of not just acceptance, but including everybody. Everybody gets a seat at the table. We have, we've got, in 1966, it was unusual to have a black woman in a position of authority on the bridge, and an Asian man, and second season we bring in a Russian.
Yeah,
that says something. Next Generation brings in a Klingon.
Yeah.
The Star Trek is always trying to say, we're all in this together.
I did want to see like a minute after the episode ends, though, and the Caddies have beamed away. And Janeway's just like, "Ugh, the most boring 3 days of my life. Put something in my coffee. I need a drink." Yeah.
Would have been nice.
Now that we've reached the end of the show, you'll receive a promotion to the rank of Lieutenant Commander. And as someone in a command position, what do you think about fraternizing between crew members?
Fraught with danger, I would imagine. It's particularly problematic when you're dealing with people on different strata of a command hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
Captain dating an ensign is problematic for the ensign, for the captain, and for the crew, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in general, I would say fraternization is fine. I mean, you're out. This is not just your military posting. This is where you live.
Yeah.
I mean, you're out,
especially in the Delta Quadrant.
Especially in the Delta Quadrant,
Yeah.
right? And in fact, if you made some decisions for Starfleet and in the Alpha Quadrant, you might make different decisions when you're lost at sea.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, I mean, they sort of dealt with that from time to time. Not enough, but fraternization. The big thing is the dealing with the power structure, I think. But of course, humans 400 years from now, 300, 400 years from now, are supposed to be more evolved, right?
Yeah.
And one would presume we've somehow bred out the need for a Me Too movement because men are better.
Well, let's hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, they dealt with that on Star Trek, right? When Picard has to make a decision about whether or not to include the woman he has feelings for on an away mission.
Right.
And then when somebody loses their life, how does he deal with that, right? And how does she deal with knowing that her fate is in his hands, and he's struggling with, do I show favoritism because I want to show favoritism?
Yeah, I believe that she was a commander, a full commander, so it wasn't a question so much of is he abusing his authority by being with her, but it was more, personally, can I be impartial and make rational decisions knowing that somebody I love is
and she was mature enough too that what you wouldn't think it was a power thing, but at the same time it impacted his ability to command, right?
Yeah.
And her ability to do her duty too. There were just open questions there, and reasonable open questions.
Sure.
But then you see Tom and B'Elanna, and hey.
Well, that's fine. Yeah. Right.
They get along so well. Everybody on their deck knows when they're having sex.
Right. Yeah.
according to 7 of 9.
7 has the data. Right.
So it's. I would suggest you might have a general guideline for a command hierarchy, but at the same time, kind of a case by case basis, really.
Yeah, they just did that on and off thing with Janeway and, or will they, won't they? Janeway and Chakotay for so long.
Right.
And I guess I'm glad that they never pulled the trigger on it, but they just...
Well, and he was, even though he was her first officer, he was initially a commanding officer, right?
Yeah. When
they combined the crew. So there's the power structure sort of, even though he's serving as her first officer, the power structure sort of disappears there.
Yeah. And another show, like Battlestar Galactica would have dove right into that, and we would have seen the relationship, the effects that it had, the breakup, the effects that had. But I just don't think that Trek wasn't that kind of show, in 1999.
No, I mean, I think under Rick Berman's stewardship, he had very specific ideas about what he wanted Star Trek to be.
Yeah.
And that's not a positive or a negative. I think it's just factual.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Piller really set up Voyager to be a study in conflict aboard a starship that we never got from Starfleet crews, and that never ended up manifesting really on Voyager. I mean, the whole Maquis Starfleet dynamic disappeared almost immediately.
Yeah.
Which I thought was unfortunate because that, I think, was a very interesting thing to explore. Specifically because we didn't see it in the original series or The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, and not likely to see it anywhere else at this
right,
point.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, Lieutenant Commander George, thanks for joining me to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. If people want to continue the conversation, and they can at EISTpod on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find you online?
I've got my website, DRGIII, that's David R. George III, DRGIII.com. As you said, I have a movie review site, that's moviereviewsbygeorge.com. I'm on Twitter, David R. George III. I've got a writing page on Facebook, Instagram. I'm everywhere.
We're all over the place.
Aren't we all?
Yes, we all are these days. And we know that you are working on some stuff you can't talk about, but we'll be definitely looking forward to that.
Thanks very much, Aaron. It's always a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, thanks again for joining me. We're signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed.
Your Honor, a courtroom is a crucible. In it we burn away irrelevancies until we are left with a pure product, the truth, for all time.
Oh man, this is so intense. Data is on trial for his life.
Shh, I know. This episode, The Measure of a Man, is based on the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision of 1857.
And every week on Backtracking, we take a look at the real-world events that inspired classic Star Trek episodes. Sorry. Shut up! Shh.
Who are you?
We're the hosts of Backtracking. I'm Caliban.
You will both be taken to the brig and from there to the nearest starbase, where you will answer charges for what you have done.
And I'm Gooey Fame.
This is not a game. This is life and death.
You can follow us on Twitter.
Backtracking is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
You go f*** yourself.